Welcome to the Explainer. So, at the very heart of the massive US-China trade dispute are two things you might not expect to see together: soybeans and rare earth minerals. Today, we're going to use them to deconstruct what is really a high-stakes geopolitical chess match.
And it really all blew up with this accusation. This quote from then-President Trump, well, it wasn't just him venting frustration. He was framing a trade decision as an act of economic aggression. And just like that, a dispute became a global standoff.
And this number right here is the reason why. 0. That's right, 0. That's how many U.S. soybean purchases China booked for the harvest at the time. Now, to put that in perspective for you, that is a staggering drop from about $12 billion in purchases just the year before. The tap was just completely turned off.
So yeah, this is the big question we're unpacking today. How does a routine purchase of a crop, something that happens all the time, suddenly become a powerful weapon in a global trade war? Let's break it all down. Okay, first up, let's look at the immediate impact. Because beyond all the politics and headlines, this dispute created a very, very real crisis for American farmers. They suddenly found themselves right on the front lines of this huge economic battle.
And a quote like this one, from farmer Dean Buchholz, it just cuts right through all that political noise to the personal despair. This wasn't about abstract economics anymore. This was about people's livelihoods, their family legacies, suddenly being put at risk.
And here is the data behind that despair. Just look at it. You can see the sheer cliff face of the collapse. From a massive market one year to absolutely nothing the next. For an industry that exports over 60% of its product, losing your biggest buyer isn't just a problem, it's a complete catastrophe.
But here's the thing. This strategy, weaponizing a key commodity, it's not actually new. To really get what's happening with soybeans, we have to look back at a very different, but strategically a very similar conflict that involved rare earth minerals.
And this is the crucial point here. The sudden stop in soybean purchases wasn't some random act. It actually mirrored a playbook that China had used before, where they leveraged their dominance over another critical set of materials to get what they wanted.
So what are rare earths anyway? Well, think of them as the invisible but absolutely essential ingredients of all modern technology. I'm talking about everything from your smartphone to advanced missile systems and AI chips. These minerals aren't everything. And here's the kicker: China has a near monopoly on supplying and processing them.
And this really brings us to the core strategy. Look, both soybeans and rare earths, even though they're totally different, they serve the exact same purpose in a trade war. They're incredibly powerful bargaining chips. One is vital for a nation's food supply, the other is vital for its entire tech and defense infrastructure. If you control them, you've got leverage. Simple as that.
This quote from economist Lu Ting really pulls back the curtain on the calculation. See, China had already been diversifying where it gets its soybeans, turning more to places like Brazil and Argentina. This made them less dependent on the US, and it turned American soybeans from a necessity into a strategic tool, a tool they could afford to give up.
So how did things get this bad? Let's trace the sequence of events and look at the accusations from both sides, because, as you'll see, each side was pretty convinced the other one started it.
From Washington's point of view, China's move to tighten its grip on rare earths was just a shocking, totally unprovoked escalation. The U.S. framed it as a hostile act, one that was designed to mess with global supply chains and get an unfair advantage.
But of course, Beijing had a completely different story. They argued their actions were not unprovoked at all. Nope, they saw the rare earth controls as a necessary, direct response to a whole series of aggressive moves by the U.S. that targeted thousands of Chinese companies with restrictions.
This timeline is absolutely key to understanding the dynamic. It wasn't just one single event. It was this rapid tit-for-tat escalation. You hit me, I hit you back harder. In late September, the U.S. expands its entity list. Just days later, boom, China hits back with rare earth controls. Then, shortly after that, the U.S. threatens even bigger tariffs. Each step of the ladder was a direct reaction to the last one.
Okay, so let's zoom out from the politics for a second and look at the real-world consequences. These high-level decisions, they don't happen in a bubble. They create very real, very tangible costs for people and industries all over the world.
For American farmers, it was basically a perfect storm. It wasn't just that their biggest customer vanished. Tariffs also drove up the costs of things they needed, like fertilizer and equipment. So they were left storing these huge amounts of unsold crops, watching prices just plummet,
and facing what one farmer called a potential bloodbath.
And this quote from the head of the American Soybean Association just perfectly captures that feeling on the ground. The timing was brutal. I mean, the key export window, from October to December, it was just slammed shut, leaving farmers with a whole harvest they couldn't sell.
And the fallout wasn't just in agriculture. Not at all. The rare earth restrictions sent shockwaves through global tech supply chains. All of a sudden, you had automakers, electronics manufacturers, even defense contractors, all facing shortages of minerals that were critical for their production lines.
So this all brings us to the core of the disagreement. Let's really break this down. Was China's decision to stop buying soybeans just a normal market choice, which they have a right to make, or was it, as President Trump claimed, an economically hostile act?
This table really helps clarify the nuance here. I mean, legally, China did nothing wrong. Every country has the sovereign right to choose who it trades with. But strategically, it was a classic geopolitical power play. And politically, calling it hostile totally changed the narrative from one of business to one of confrontation. The thing is, all three can be true at the same time.
And that really leaves us with this final, kind of provocative question. In our deeply interconnected world, where exactly is the line between a simple market choice and an act of economic warfare? It's a question that's more relevant today than ever before.